Hey, we have some movement. Welcome into a bonus kind of emergency edition of Fantasy Baseball today on Saturday, January 3rd. Happy New Year to everybody. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. And yes, we had movement, but it was kind of because it was forced by a deadline. Not kind of. It was forced by a deadline. So pitcher Tatsuya Imai is signing with the Houston Astros, while corner infielder Kazuma Okamoto is signing with the Blue Jays. So let's dive right in here, Chris, and talk about these two players. Imai to the Astros on a 3-year, $54 million deal that can get up to $63 million with incentives. He also has player opt-outs after the first and second years of the deal. Just been a weird offseason end market. I wonder if the looming lockout has anything to do with it. Kind of feels that way. We saw contract projections in the 150 million plus range for Imai, and winds up settling for the guaranteed 54 million here. Again, that could get up to 63 million. So Imai is 27 years old. He has been really good in the NPB over the past 4 years. He took it to another level this past season. 192 ERA, a .89 whip, 178 strikeouts, over 163 and 2/3 innings. What are your initial thoughts here on Imai, the pitcher, and this landing spot in Houston?
Yeah, so I've been treating Imai like he was going to get a Framber Valdez-like contract. And unless Framber Valdez is about to sign for a lot less than anyone expects, I think that's out the window. So I do think when it comes to these players coming over from Japan, the contract that they get should very much color our expectations for them. Because while obviously MLB teams don't know exactly how these guys will translate, they have presumably access to the full suite of data about what these guys are doing in Japan and in terms of the underlying quality of contact stuff that we have seen, but I don't know if what we're going on is as robust as the stuff we get from StatCast. I don't know if it's as publicly available. I certainly don't have access to all the granular stuff that we look at. So we're kind of taking a lot of this stuff at like second or third party information. But I assume when the Houston Astros signed Tatsuya Imai to a 3-year, $54 million contract, they're doing so with all the information, all the IVB and whiff rate, in zone, and everything that they want. And so there is always, I think, an information asymmetry when it comes to what the public knows versus what the teams know about players. I think that's just a natural result of the private sector being a little more up to date and a little more ahead of the curve than we are. It's not a knock on us. They're $1 billion franchises making these decisions. We are not. So yeah, the stakes are higher for MLB teams. So they have better information than we do. But in this case, I can look at what Framber Valdez has done against major league hitters over the last 5 seasons, and I have access to a bunch of data about how that's gone. I have no access to how Tatsuya Imai has done against major league hitters. And so MLB teams don't either, but they have models and they're smarter than me. So I will defer to them. And that's all a long way of saying that when you look at similar contracts to the one Imai signed, it's pretty iffy. It's hard to make one-to-one comparisons. There's the posting fee that you have to account for, where the team that Imai was on gets paid a certain percentage of his contract up front. That'll dilute his actual contract number. But, you know, you compare it to like Pablo Lopez, 4 years, $73.5 million. I think that was with a couple of years of club control left, so not a perfect comp. Yusei Kikuchi was a free agent and got 3 years, $64 million. Taijuan Walker was a free agent, got 4 years, $72 million. That's the same AAV as Tatsuya Imai, but with an extra year guaranteed on it. Michael Wacha, $351, basically the same contract. Jameson Taillon, $468. Shodi Managa, when he was coming over from Japan, $453. Kodai Senga, $575, more guaranteed, longer control, so a lower AAV. It's surprising how little Tatsuya Imai got, honestly. Like, he's at 27. He doesn't turn 28 until May. He's been very successful in the second best professional league in baseball. Pitching is obviously at a premium. I am genuinely surprised that he did not get more more money than he did. And I do think it should color how we view him, where I think there was a chance he was going to get pushed into like the SP3 range for fantasy after signing. Well, you know, Michael Wacha money doesn't necessarily suggest that. Like Merrill Kelly signed 2 weeks ago for 2 years, $40 million.
Yeah.
I think this is telling us that MLB thinks he's a starting caliber pitcher, but not a difference maker, not someone who's going to carry a rotation, who's going to step in. And that's not to say he can't be, right? Like he got a slightly better deal than Shodi Managa, and Shodi Managa was a top 20 pitcher his rookie season. He might have been top 10, top 12, if I remember correctly.
Top 15 for sure. I was just going to make the comparison. If you're just looking at recent pitchers that came over from Japan, he did wind up getting more AAV on a per year basis than someone like Imanaga or Kodai Senga, two guys who had huge success their first years in Major League Baseball. And Imanaga, while the underlying numbers weren't as great this past season, he still had a pretty good fantasy season.
Kodai Senga was very good last year until he got hurt too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could just be, I totally understand what you're saying about teams having more information. There are clear questions here, concerns, but not every team is always right about these.
Sure,
things.
absolutely.
So I do kind of want to just paint the glass half full. There is a chance that Imai is really good, but again, there are questions. We just don't know. And I think some of the questions, things that I've read, some concerns about durability and things like that. Although if you look at the past couple seasons, up over 160 innings 2 years in a row, I don't really worry about that too much. To me, the biggest question is the control. So since 2021, his walks per nine have improved drastically, but from where they were, I mean, this was an untenable level for any starting pitcher. 5.6 walks per nine back in 2021, down to 5.1, 4.1, 3.6, and all the way down to 2.5 this past season. So really, Chris, the biggest question for me is, can he maintain that level of control we just saw this past season? Because if that jumps up over 3 walks per nine and he's right around a strikeout per inning, maybe less than that, we might have real whip concerns for someone like Imai. So for me, that's the biggest question.
Yeah, and that's similar to Kodai Senga, who had big control issues earlier in his career. As he got closer to the majors, it improved, and it hasn't been untenable at the major league level. So I think you can assume that, he'll give some of it back. Major league hitters are just better, and so it's going to be tougher. But, you know, when you're talking about it from a rookie year perspective, I think you look at a couple of things. One, clearly a talented pitcher, right? Like to have the success he had at the NPB level, that's not fake, right? Like you can pitch at the major league level. For me, it's a question of, you know, I think at the beginning of the offseason, there was a lot of hype around Imai, and, you know, some of the comps that were being thrown around were, you know, top 10, top 15 type starters for fantasy. And I think the contract just should give a little pause on that. But it is generally true that hitters tend to perform worse against pitchers the less they've seen them. And obviously, very few major league hitters will have ever seen Tatsuya Imai. I don't remember, did he pitch in the World Baseball Classic?
I believe he did.
Okay.
Yeah,
so maybe
numbers on that. Though.
Maybe a few guys have seen. Trey Turner and Mike Trout might have seen him, but there's not a lot of guys out there. So there should be some of that element of surprise that we saw from Senga and Imanaga. I think Imai not quite as unique as Imanaga in terms of, like, you know, Imanaga's a shorter, like 5'11" pitcher from the left side who relied heavily on a splitter. We talked about that a lot. That was just something major league hitters just have not seen very much of in recent years, is short lefties with splitters. Well, Imai's not quite that weird, but he's got this low arm slot fastball that he throws with, you know, pretty good movement profile. Some of the movement statistics that'll get thrown out there have to be taken with a grain of salt because the ball does move differently. In Japan, they use a different baseball. It's a little smaller. The seams are a little smaller, and it's tackier. So it just moves differently, moves more. But he's got both a changeup and a splitter, which is weird. Not a lot of guys do that. So already you got a little bit of funkiness there. He's got this slider that actually moves arm side rather than glove side, which, as far as I understand, it was like only Trey Savage's slider last season had as much arm side run as Tatsuya Imai. It's more maybe screwball-ish. And so I've kind of made it a mantra lately, but weird is good at starting pitcher. I do think Tatsuya Imai is pretty weird. So I do think there's definitely room for him to outperform what he signed for. And to his credit, if he does that, he goes back into free agency next season.
Yeah.
Like if Tatsuya Imai has a 3.70 ERA over 160 innings in 2026, he's 100% a free agent.
Yeah.
And he's pushing for a $70-80 million deal. And if he has a 3 ERA next offseason, he's pushing for $120 million.
If he comes anywhere close to what Senga or Imanaga did in their rookie seasons, he's getting paid.
If he replicates Shota Imanaga's rookie season as a 28-year-old rookie, he is opting out and getting $120 million. And I think that's fairly easy. So you can see how the 354 does not necessarily tell the whole story. I think it is a little surprising that nobody else was willing to beat that.
I mean, that part of it to me is absolutely crazy. I understand.
Yeah, like the Yankees. Like, what are the Yankees doing?
But the Mets need pitching so badly. So do the Astros. So
didn't Frankie Montas signed for like a very similar deal last year, right?
33 or something.
Yeah, the Sean Manaea. His contract wasn't that dissimilar from this one, right? Like,
it was 3 for 63 or something.
Yeah, like these are
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, these are numbers that the Mets, the Yankees, any team should have been willing to beat. And so that's why it's weird to me. And maybe it was just, I don't know, maybe he really wanted to play in Houston. I don't know. He likes suburban sprawl and the train that runs when they hit home runs. Do they still do that? Do the train?
I have no idea. I think they do like the choo-choo.
There's a train
sound effect or something, but yeah.
But, you know, we don't know everything that goes into it. Maybe he got a better offer. I haven't seen anything about that. But it's just surprising, and it gives me pause that he wasn't able to get more than he did. But I like everything in theory besides that. Yeah. It's just trying to be a little humble and acknowledge that the people running, David Stearns is better at analyzing baseball than I am. So if he wasn't willing to give Tatsuya Imai a bigger contract than he gave Sean Manaea or whatever, that should tell me something. It's not everything. And my expectations are still reasonably high. I still think he should probably be like a top 150-ish pick. Before he signed, I actually had him ranked right next to Pablo Lopez and Nick Lodolo. I know you like Nick Lodolo more than I do, so maybe you have Lodolo a little higher than that, but I have him in a range with Robbie Ray, Tatsuya Imai, Pablo Lopez, Nick Lodolo, and Ryan Pepio, where there's some upside, some downside across the board there, but I think that's a fine range for Tatsuya Imai, right?
So I, in my preliminary rankings, have him at SP 50.
Okay.
And that could be lower. Yeah, I think it's closer to like an SP low and SP4, SP5 type, just shooting for some upside here.
Yeah, let me see. Again,
it's pretty deep. I have him just behind Trevor Rogers, Chris Bubich, Ranger Suarez, and just ahead of pitchers that have questions. Like Evaldi was great last year, but there's big injury concerns. Luis Castillo, he kind of faked it for another season, but he's clearly declining. Carlos Rodon has the injury.
Would you rather have
was fine, but the strikeouts were down. So
would you rather have Imanaga or Imai?
I have Imanaga. You know what? I might have missed him in my rankings, but I think that that's a good question.
You know what? I feel like we should just have a podcast where we go through every single player, all 600, and make sure we have everyone, because that's a big fear of mine. Like, oh, I published my rankings. First comment, where's this guy? Well, there's a lot of guys. All right, I got 600 or 599. You focus on the one guy I missed.
I think I would probably take Imanaga just because I've seen him have so much success already at the major league level. But that is the range. To me, that is the right range.
Yeah, I have him 43. But as we've talked about, kind of every one after 30, I don't know, between 30 and 60 is kind of a squishy. Like, it's a squishy 43. It's like 43, but it could be 55 very easily. And I think I have Castillo, or I have Shane Bieber at 55. Genuinely have no idea who I'd rather have between Shane Bieber and Imai. That's after the report earlier in the offseason that Bieber's dealing with forearm. What was the forearm tightness, and like he's we hope he's going to be ready for spring training, which was like The injury was in September.
Yeah.
or October. I feel like we would have better than hope for that. So or like Michael King has a lot of upside. I genuinely don't know what to make of him. He got a similar, bigger contract, but he's more proven, obviously. So I think that range, 40 to 50, there's upside. I think should be fine. So yeah, there's a lot of good pitchers out there, though.
Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll wrap up talking about Tatsuya Imai. Then we'll also get into Kazuma Okamoto. We'll do that right after this.
This isn't just combat. It's cinema.
Ready or not, here I come. Let's go!
Are you not entertained?
The new home of UFC, Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. A little bonus podcast here on Saturday, June 3rd. Again, Happy New Year. Tatsuya Imai headed to the Houston Astros. We spoke a little bit about his pitch mix and things like that, where we're ranking him. Again, just want to point out once again, the fastball it's supposed to have really good shape, comes from a lower arm slot. He sits 95 miles per hour. And when we were out at First Pitch Arizona, Eno Saris, who obviously knows a ton about pitching, was raving about Tatsuya Imai. So he was very excited about that. Again, Imai has this kind of arm side slider that's very unique. It's supposed to be platoon neutral. He has multiple different changeup splitters. He added like a Vulcan changeup late in the season. So we'll see what he could do once he comes over. We had Yaku Cosmopolitan on in late November. He comped Imai to Kodai Senga, except younger and more durable. So I guess do with that what you will. And of course, go back and listen to that podcast because he covers Japanese baseball extensively and obviously knows a lot more about these players than we do. The Astros updated rotation includes Hunter Brown, Tatsuya Imai, Christian Javier, Mike Burrows, one of Spencer Arrighetti, Ryan Weiss, Lance McCullers, Jason Alexander. The list goes on and on. They do have quite a bit of depth options, and it's a great pickup, honestly, for the Houston Astros to take a shot on some upside here with Imai. And they're a great organization for pitching, too. Yes. So they should be able to hopefully get the most out of him. The NFBC ADP over the last 2 weeks for Imai is 161 as the SP 45 off the board, right between Trey Savage and Bubba Chandler. So, Chris, how would you rank those three?
That sounds right. I've got him 43. I have Chandler 42, 41, 40, 39. And I have, who's the other guy?
Trey Savage.
Trey Savage is 38. No, 40. So I have them all within 5 picks of each other. I think it's all, maybe Chandler in particular, I think has a leg up on just sheer arm talent. Like that dude just spins it and throws it better than the other two guys, right? Like you're talking about a guy who maxes out at 100, a couple other guys who max out at 97, 98. He sits 3 to 4 miles per hour ahead of them, but that's not everything. These are two other guys are weirder, which is not a bad thing. So I think that's the right range. I've got those guys. Maybe I just move Imai up 3 spots and I just go McLean, Mizurowski, Schlittler, Chandler, Savage, Imai, all in order in my SP rankings and just call it a day and don't think about it.
I fully agree with what you said earlier that the SP really like 25-ish range down to 50 or 60 feels extremely close. You're splitting hairs on all these guys. I have Trey Savage at SP 33. I have Bubba Chandler at SP 40. And then I have Imai down at SP 50, as I mentioned, or 49. So right around there, a little bit lower than those guys. But again, this is very much so open to change and things as we learn more information and get to see some of these guys throughout spring training. Let's move over to Kazuma Okamoto, who is signing with the Blue Jays on a 4-year, $60 million deal. He is a 29-year-old corner infielder, very different hitter than Munetaka Murakami, who only got the 2 years. I believe it was $34 million from the White Sox a couple of weeks earlier. Much more polished hitter here for Okamoto. He's coming off a season where he hit 327, 15 homers, 1014 OPS. He did all of that in just 69 games. He had the same number of walks and strikeouts among NPB hitters. Okamoto, among NPB hitters with at least 250 plate appearances, Okamoto ranked first in OPS and first in weighted runs created plus. So he is, by all accounts, the best hitter in Japan right now. Chris, what do you think about Okamoto, the hitter, and his fit with the Toronto Blue Jays?
The fit with the Toronto Blue Jays makes perfect sense. It's I feel like it almost became like a bit of a meme in the postseason of like, look at the Blue Jays hitting for contact and for power. They can do it both. They're the only team that can do both. And it's like, other teams can do that. But yes, that was a big thing that the Blue Jays did well last season, was they were able to combine their contact hitting skills from prior to 2025 while actually hitting the ball a lot harder. Their team-wide power metrics improved across the board, whether you're talking about results or process. And Okamoto fits into that. He is another guy who can put the ball in play without sacrificing power. Several 30-homer seasons. When you look at recent guys who have come over from Japan or Korea, I'll throw in Jung-Hoo Lee here, there aren't a lot of guys who have the skill set for both, right? You had Masataka Yoshida, who was arguably a better overall hitter than Kazuma Okamoto. Okamoto's 2025 season was probably better than any of Yoshida's 210 weighted runs created plus. Yoshida had several seasons with like a 170 WRC plus or higher, including a 202 in his final season. He didn't hit for as much power. He was much more batting average and plate discipline focus. Jung-Hoo Lee, similar thing in Korea. Even Seiya Suzuki, I don't think, was he hitting for quite this much power during his, let me pull that up. He had a 38 homer season, his final, yeah. Similar, he was running about 17% strikeout rates in Korea. He's jumped up to about 25% in the pros and in the majors. And so, Okamoto's been right in that 15 to 18% range for most of his career. Last year was 11%, but it was only 69 games. It's worth keeping in mind. His rate stats are going to be a little fluky. 4 years, $60 million for a 29-year-old seems fine. Like that's a decent contract. It doesn't scare me off. There aren't a lot of like corner infielders who have gotten similar contracts to that over the years. You either get a lot less or a lot more if you're a first base / third baseman. And so I don't know, like Christian Walker was 3 years, $64 million. He was 4 years older, so I don't know how much you want to take from that. I don't think Okamoto is likely to be a 40-homer guy in the majors, certainly. I just don't think the raw pop is there. From what I've seen, the max exit velos are more in the 108 to 110 mile per hour range, which is not bad, but not significantly above average. He makes a lot of contact. He pulls the ball, hits the ball in the air to the pull side, does those things well. And so I do think it's possible you can look at it and see like a sub-peak Nolan Arenado type of deal, like those last couple of decent years in St. Louis, maybe. I don't think that's the median outcome, but I think that's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good one. I mean, the early projections have him for around 250 with 20 home runs. We know projections are very conservative. They are 50th percentile outcomes, and they are even more conservative for rookie players. Whether you're coming over from Japan or you're just a prospect getting called up, they are pretty conservative in that way. So even, tack on a little bit more on that. Can he hit 260-ish with 20 to 25 home runs? That's possible. It's probably still more like a corner infielder for fantasy, I think, than anything else. If you look at Toronto and Rogers Center and the way that it's played out in recent years, specifically for right-handed batters, it's both tied for 9th in overall park factor for righties and tied for 9th in home run park factor for righties. So it actually has played out pretty well there. Roster Resource has Okamoto playing at third base with Addison Barger shifting to right field. Their updated lineup as of now: George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Vlad Jr., Anthony Santander, Alejandro Kirk, Addison Barger, Okamoto, Ernie Clement, and Andres Jimenez. I do wonder if they bring back Bo Bichette. I still feel like that would work out very seamless. Bo Bichette either at shortstop or second, Andres Jimenez playing the other one. And then
seems like every report indicates that's still a live possibility. It's not necessarily a guarantee, but the Okamoto signing and the Cease signing and the Tyler Rogers signing, they've had a great offseason. I love the Blue Jays offseason. Love what they're doing.
They just made it to the World Series,
Yep.
and that was not enough for them. They're going out and adding a bunch here. So
adding a ton of talent. They're getting presumably Anthony Santander back for a full season. I love seeing the Blue Jays put the pedal to the metal. I'm probably going to rank Okamoto very similar to Munetaka Murakami, right around 200th. They're very different players. And Okamoto got the longer contract. Murakami got a little higher AAV and the chance to become a free agent at 28, which he clearly valued. I do want to point out Murakami was the significantly better hitter in their careers in Japan. I know that there are big questions about whether the hit tool will play for Murakami, and that's all fair, but like even Okamoto's best season was a 210 WRC plus. Murakami was 211 last year. And he has a season at 225.
Yeah.
And he has, I think, 6 total seasons at 160 or above. Okamoto only has 3 seasons above 150, I think. So in their NPB careers, Murakami was clearly the better hitter. I just want to put that out there. I don't know if that's going to be the case at the major league level. I've seen some stats that Okamoto handled, 95 mile per hour plus velocity better than Murakami. It's a small sample size. I don't know. I think Murakami's got the higher ceiling. I think Okamoto's, probably best case scenario is like, 270, 30-ish homers, a bunch of RBI playing in a great lineup. Like, I think he could be very good.
Yeah.
I think you can see a 40 homer outcome from Murakami, just with the pretty significant difference in raw power.
Again, when I had Yaku Cosmopolitan on, he said if Murakami hits his ultimate upside, it looks like Nick Kurtz.
Yeah.
I mean, it's power to all fields, like generational power.
Kyle Schwarber,
power, hitting, maybe the batting average isn't great, but if it's like 250 with 40 plus home runs, like that's the upside for someone like Murakami. I agree with your assessment of Okamoto. Again, just a very different hitter here. The early ADP last 2 weeks for Okamoto at 330.
Yeah, much lower.
The 26th third baseman off the board, just behind Miguel Vargas and ahead of Josh Young. That is going to move up now that we know where he's going to play, and obviously really good lineup, really good fit there with the Toronto Blue Jays. I have him slotted in at 22 at third base, which has him just behind other kind of like boring hitters, I guess, like Alec Boehm and Carlos Correa, Vientos, who I think still has some upside. So, and ahead of guys like Caleb Durbin and Miguel Vargas and Colt Keith. So it represented a pretty good, I think a pretty good range in the third base rankings too. A guy that has a pretty good floor, but maybe has a little bit of untapped potential. So.
Yeah, I actually ended up with him at looks like 14.
Okay.
But it's a squishy 14. Like if you really wanted to pound the table for Matt Shaw or Max Muncy, I wouldn't argue too much with you, but I would take Okamoto ahead of those guys. I have him right behind Royce Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to again shoot for a player that we just haven't seen yet, and again, there's kind of that mystery bag instead of the boring Boehm or Correa.
Yeah.
I could see getting him as high as like 16 or 17 in my own personal rankings. I have Brett Beatty pretty high too, just because I'm kind of interested to see what he could do over a full season if the Mets just don't mess with him. He played really well in the second half of the season. So kind of excited about what he can do as well. But there you go. We finally have some movement here. Tatsuya Imai is signing with the Houston Astros, and Kazuma Okamoto is headed to the Toronto Blue Jays. We are going to wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball Today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again on Monday night. Bye-bye.